Welcome, everyone. Good to see you here on, what day is it? It's Thursday. It's Third Coast Thursday. I'm trying to get my days straight. Down here in Central Florida, we've got thunderstorms coming through. So, it's just, who knows what's going to happen? It's hurricane season. But welcome. My name is Angela Young Smucker, and I'm the Executive Director of Third Coast Baroque. And if you haven't joined us before, welcome. If you're watching the replay, we hope that you enjoy this interview here with my friend Anita. I'll be talking about her and welcoming her in just a second. But before we do that, I want to let you know that you can subscribe and follow us on all the things. You can go to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and follow us there so you can keep track of what's going on and catch any past episodes of Third Coast Thursday or Meet the Artist that we do every Tuesday. You can also go to thirdcoastbaroque.org and click subscribe. That's where you can sign up for our email newsletter and keep in touch with us. We recently just announced our 2020-21 season, which we're very excited about, and our first concerts will be coming up in September. So if you want to find out more, make sure you subscribe to that email newsletter and follow us online so you can be in tune with all the updates as they come out. We'll be making some announcements very soon about that. In the meantime, I want to just draw your attention to one more announcement. Our Capo Club. We recently started this wonderful club where you can help sustain Third Coast Baroque now and in the future. Just like a Da Capo aria repeats, so can your gift. And if you go to Third Coast Baroque/donate and are one of the first 5 people to sign up as a $10 a month donor, you will get a Third Coast Baroque tote bag, which is super handy. And if you are one of the first 10 people to sign up as a $20 a month Da Capo Club member, you will get a limited edition tote bag and coffee mug. They're fantastic. So we will be keeping track of those. And John, so good to see you, friend. Happy Thursday. Our board president, John Sagos, is with us today, so I'm very excited about that. I'm going to stop yapping here, and I'm going to welcome my friend Anita Strange Rebecchi. How are you, my dear?
I am just great, and I thank you and appreciate the fact that you have allowed me to join you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're here. And I have to say, I pulled out my special bright blue glasses in your honor today. For those of you who don't know, Anita has one of the best eyeglasses collections I've ever seen. And it's rare that you see anything repeated.
I'm trying to compete with Oprah and Gail.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, Anita, like I said,
and Marshall.
Yeah, Marshall.
Marshall.
I know. My goodness. She's amazing. And I see Marshall backstage with us here. So welcome, my dear. It's so good to have you all. Well, I wanted to bring you on today because we met just a year and a half or so ago, I believe.
A year and a half ago, maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend named John Lee who happened upon your Jazzin and Bronzeville series, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I remember coming to my first Jazzin and Bronzeville show in early 2019. And it was just incredible. And I was so glad I got to meet you. And we started talking and concocting ideas and things like that, which we'll also talk about today. But before we get into that, I'd love for people to get to know you a little bit better. So as I start with most of my interviews, would you mind talking a little bit about your musical origin story and how music connects with your life?
Well, I started taking piano lessons in the 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't appreciate it because I was forced to take it. I took piano from 2nd grade to freshman in high school. And actually, the only reason I stopped taking piano lessons was because my piano teacher passed. But I didn't appreciate it, and I was pretty good. And then as I got older, I wanted to refresh myself on the piano.
Mm-hmm.
I always liked music. And so um, my parents didn't really play a lot of music records, but I have a sister that's 11 years older than me, and she played a lot of music, and I played my parents' old music that they never listened to.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents had old albums of Nat King Cole,
Mm-hmm.
Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and my sister, though being 11 years older than me, had Arthur Prysock, Nancy Wilson, Al Jarreau, the Beatles, Lou Rawls, and she played it constantly. So I knew all those songs, and I began to appreciate different genres of music
Mm-hmm.
because of my sister, and I thank her for that to this day. And so I can appreciate all genres of music. And as a child, I went to private school, and we would go to Orchestra Hall, which is now called, I think, Symphony Center in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we would go 3 to 4 times a year to hear symphony music. So I would sit in Orchestra Hall, and I can honestly say I went to a private school. We would be the only Black children in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great experience for me. I would sit there and look at the architecture of the hall and listen to the music and just
Mm.
imagine all kind of possibilities, just
Do
getting to
you
music and everything. It was just fantastic to me.
do
And
you remember what it was like, sort of the first time you walked into the building to experience that?
when I walked into the building to experience that, it was, first of all, it was eye opening because we were the only Black students there.
Mm-hmm.
This was in the late 60s,
Mm-hmm.
going into the early 70s, because we went all through from kindergarten to eighth grade to Orchestra Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that first experience, getting off the school bus,
Mm-hmm.
being surrounded by all white children and being the only Black class there was eye opening to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of surreal.
Mm-hmm.
Was a little scary, but in a way, it wasn't really scary. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a wonderful experience. I sat there, and even though I did not quite understand the music at a quite a young age, I loved it.
Uh,
Loved it. I loved the experience of it. I looked around. I heard the music, just the architecture of Orchestra Hall.
mm-hmm.
Was just impassioned by the music. And then because I took piano, even though I didn't like taking piano lessons, it was
But see, you never hear anybody say, "Man, I'm so glad my parents didn't make me take piano." Like I think everybody who's taken piano lessons or hasn't taken piano lessons, they either are glad they did or they wish they had.
right. I'm glad I did, and I wish I had have appreciated it then.
Right.
Because now I have a piano in my home, and I'm trying to reteach myself. And in Nashville here, they are offering free piano lessons, so I have signed up for that. So
What?
I can get some free piano lessons and help me along on this journey.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So we had talked before, and you mentioned when you were in school, sort of how you were involved in music. And would you mind sharing the story about your operetta and your turtle song?
Okay, so I went to a private grammar school called St. Edmund's Parochial School. It's
Uh-huh.
located in Chicago on 51st and Michigan.
Hmm.
school is no longer in existence, but the church is. It's an Episcopal church.
Mm-hmm.
Edmonds was actually the first, one of the first, it was actually two, one of the first African American private schools in Chicago. The other
Really?
one was Howelton Day School.
Okay.
So St. Edmunds had one of the first private schools, and because we were church members, I went to that school from kindergarten through 8th grade.
Okay.
We had operettas every year from the time I was in kindergarten to 8th grade. And the operettas were, we did Snow White, we did Rip Van Winkle, and I can't, because of my age, I can't remember all of them. But every class participated in the operettas.
Mm-hmm.
We all had singing numbers in this operetta. And the 8th grade class, they were the stars.
Okay.
So they were the stars. And so in my 8th grade class, we did the Cowtail Switch. And the Cowtail Switch was an African-based play that my music teacher, who was actually my piano teacher too,
Mm-hmm.
she adapted this play. And I wanted to be the turtle. And the turtle had a big part, and so I got the part.
Uh-huh.
I had to sing a song in this paper mache turtle shell.
Uh-huh.
And it was, I don't remember all the lyrics, but it was something like, it is man that imposes things upon man. We create chaos.
Mm.
So it was a great song, and my piano teacher, Mrs. Jean Fletcher Millette, did the music for this. And I had to play, and I don't know the name of the African instrument offhand, but I had to play a little instrument while I sang this song. And it was very monumental for me. And doing these plays from kindergarten through 8th grade gave me an opportunity to learn how to speak in front of people,
Mm-hmm.
to learn how to perform, and to give me a stage presence and to learn how to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud St. Edmunds Parochial School for that opportunity. And I did it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell, like, I've seen you speaking in public, and you are just incredibly engaging and incredibly dynamic. And, people perk up when you start to talk.
Well, thank you.
Well, so you have mentioned in our previous conversation how you sort of steered your way more toward drama, and not necessarily focusing on music so much, but you really enjoyed drama, and explored that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, in high school, I started in public speaking first, and then I studied drama. And I went through every stage of drama. I went to a private high school, Aquinas Dominican High School, in South Shore of Chicago, Illinois. And I started, I went through every stage of drama, every class that they had. And I had an excellent drama teacher, Sister Diane.
Mm-hmm.
And in my senior year, I had done everything I could to get credits, and she allowed me to do a project to get credits for school, which I produced a play. And I had students from Aquinas participate in the play. And unfortunately, I cannot remember the name of the play, but it was great. We had Santa, and I produced the whole play. We had young children, and then we also took the play to different places like Laura Beta Hospital in Chicago, to different schools in the South Side area of Chicago, and presented it to young students in the area. So I had a great experience at Aquinas doing drama. And then I kind of stepped away from drama for a while. And recently I started with the Black Olive Group and
Mhm.
Aroki Rice, and I started doing stage readings.
Yeah,
So
so for those of you who don't know about the Black Olive Theater Company in Hyde Park, Miss Aroki Rice is the director of that company, and she presents stage readings of plays, and it's incredible. And I saw that you were doing some over this last year before you moved, and Chicago lost you.
I did
um,
the wedding band. I did the Bluest Eyes, which was extremely emotional.
mm.
The Bluest Eyes was hard to do.
Was that Toni Morrison?
Yeah, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eyes. And
Yes.
so as a group with Black Olive Group, we went down to Gene Siskel Center to
Hmm.
watch the Toni Morrison documentary and to learn about her, how she came about The Bluest Eyes.
Hmm.
Just to read those lines and to be in that production was um, it was kind of traumatic
Hmm.
because you're experiencing this, and as a black person, you can understand. As an African American person, you can understand this mental and the physical anguish in these characters' lives.
Hmm.
So it was a hard play, but it was a very refreshing play for me because
Hmm.
it made me see some things that I didn't realize that I knew of, experienced, or knew of people that had experienced these things in their lives in my community. So
Wow.
it was a changing moment in my life to do that play.
I love it. And
So
I'm so sad to have missed it, but knowing you, I know that you gave a captivating performance along with your
Roki always puts me as the sassy person. I don't know why.
I wonder why. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us. I wanted folks to hear about part of your musical journey, your dramatic journey, your connection with the arts. Because I think it's had um, I'm going to mute you for just one second. I'm getting a little feedback, but I wanted people to understand sort of where you're coming from in terms of how you've connected with music and the arts over the years and how it's influenced you, because it's definitely clear that that the arts have had a significant impact on your life. Um, before I skip ahead to your work in Bronzeville, uh, I wanted to talk about your work in social work, and if you might be able to talk about that a little bit and how you got to that, how you came to that work.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So I came to be a social worker because in my early 20s, I became addicted to crack cocaine
Hmm.
and I became homeless at about 28. I was a functioning addict. I had my son in private school and was doing everything I thought I could do to stay functional while being an addict until about the age of 28.
Mm.
And I had my son at a young age. So let me say that first. I had my son when I was 16, but
Mm.
I had my son in private school as you know I was trying to function. And then at 28, then my mother passed, and I kind of hit rock bottom. And by 28, I was homeless.
Mm.
So from about 28 to let's say about 30, 30 years of age till about 40, I was homeless on the streets in Logan Square. Um, and then I got clean and sober, got married, and when my husband passed, I decided to go back to work to become to study sociology, and then a master's in social work.
Mm-hmm.
I took the master's in social work because of my past experience of being homeless and realizing that I had been a person that had a wonderful childhood, a wonderful education, a wonderful family environment, and that knowing and seeing other people that were on drugs that didn't have that experience, knowing that you can't do better if you don't know better.
Right.
So I began to understand that there were people that could not do better because of systemic things in their lives, poverty, education, that they could not come out of that without some help. So that's when I decided to do my undergrad in sociology and my grad work in social work, and to become a social worker.
Mm-hmm. And then did you, what kind of work were you able to do while you were in the program or when you graduated and were out?
Well, once I graduated, I started working with a nonprofit called Diamonds in the Rough, and I worked on a program to get young women who had been incarcerated into the plumbing field.
Mm.
And we did a program that gave these young women training, apprenticeships to get them into the plumbing trade.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did some work with the Chicago homeless.
Was it Chicago Homeless Coalition?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
The Chicago Homeless Coalition, and I did work with them, and so I've tried to continue to work with and do volunteer work to help different areas between drug addiction, homelessness, and music, to help people to get out of this systemic narrative that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of the systemic problems that you were trying to help people out of, I mean, this is sort of what the big national and global discussion is right now. And the Black Lives Matter movement and the social justice movement are, I mean, they're at the forefront of what we're all seeing and what we're all experiencing. And I was just wondering if you might talk a little bit about how this has affected you or what effect it's had on you, having experienced, the civil rights movement of the 60s and gone through the past decades of different iterations of this. Does this feel different to you?
Well, in the 60s, I was very young. And I remember my mother wanting to go to protest,
Mm-hmm.
and my father saying no, because he was afraid for her safety.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but, and I was very young, and I don't think I quite understood the significance of it.
Sure.
Because I was probably 11.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand how important it was, or just the impact it had on my life. But now I'm 60 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I am saddened by the deaths of our Black youth by police, and the police brutality and the racial profiling that has occurred. But this is historic.
Mm-hmm.
This is historic through slavery, from slavery on to Emmett Till, to the riots in Chicago in, I think, 1919. These kind of things are historic, and we cannot keep sugarcoating them and not putting them in our history books.
Right.
You know, our history books do not depict these. I'm sorry for that noise.
That's okay.
Our history books do not depict the Black history.
Mm-hmm.
The
It's usually reserved for a little special section where we talk about Black history, and it's 1 month of the year, and it's its own category. But
really don't tell the tale.
Right.
Like Black Wall Street, the anniversary was this past week, 100 years.
And I'll admit, I've never heard of that.
They destroyed the whole town.
My goodness.
They burnt it down.
Wow.
The whole town. So we have to make sure that our history is heard, that people know of the social injustices that have happened, because they are not captured in our history books.
Right.
And so a lot of Caucasians, white people really don't know this history.
Absolutely. And you can see, I mean, you can just see the conversations and the comments that are happening on social media now. There are a lot of white people saying, I had no idea. I'm trying to educate myself. You and I have talked about this. I've talked with other Black friends of mine who've so generously, given their time to talk about things. But I think we're at a point where, it's on us to educate ourselves and not rely on our Black friends or friends of color who have been experiencing this and struggling this and fighting this all of their lives. It's up to us to know and learn this history so we can learn from it.
We have to make sure that publishers like Scott's Foreman, Simon & Schuster, and different other publishers that publish educational books and put them in our schools, make these companies do the pure history. Don't and I hate to say this, don't whitewash it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what's happened.
to omit things that this country has done.
Sure.
To Black Americans, to Chinese, to Indians. This country, unfortunately, has treated a lot of people badly.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that and try to make amends.
And I think, I mean, obviously I haven't experienced the decades before. But I feel like there's almost a tipping point or a critical mass that's building at this point.
I'm going to tell you a little story. When I was young, now that I live in Nashville, when I was young, we used to do family reunions in Detroit and Nashville. Every year we'd switch up years, Chicago, Nashville, because my mother's family had relatives in Detroit and Nashville. And we would drive to Nashville at least once a year. And I would always ask my parents, let's stop here. Let's stop there. And my mother would always pack food. And I never understood why we could not stop different places. Why we had to use the bathroom on the side of the road sometimes. This was before they built freeways, though, when I was quite young. Stop, and my parents wouldn't stop at gas stations or family restaurants, but they never really told me why. To protect me, they didn't tell me why they didn't stop, and it was because they were scared to stop. There was a green book that told African American families different places when traveling that were safe for them to stop, to get refreshments, to sleep, to board, and my parents kept that away from me to, I guess, just out of safety and just to have me have a happy childhood, not to know the fear that there really was when we were on the road.
Wow.
And we did this often, and my parents kept it from me, and I appreciate it now, but I can't imagine the fear that they had when we were traveling.
Do you remember when you found out about the Green Book and why your parents had kept that, or why they had stopped where they did and how they kept it from you? Do you remember when you discovered that?
honestly, I did not find out about the Green Book and why my parents did that till maybe 15 or 20 years ago.
Really?
Now I was very grown.
Wow.
You know,
But see, I mean, that's an
history. I didn't even know the history.
right. I mean, that and that's an example of how, things like that in our own country's history that have just sort of been pushed aside and haven't been talked about.
Yes,
And the conversation is starting to open up. And this is, I feel, I mean, I feel really honored that you're here today and that you're open to having these conversations and talking about what's going on right now and how it's affecting us personally, because that's where it starts, right? It starts
yes,
individually dealing with a larger systemic thing. And, for those of you who are watching, we're not going to solve the problems of the world in this one episode, but we're going to keep talking about it and see if we can figure out solutions for our community. But speaking of community, one thing that has always inspired me, impressed me, just gave me so much joy was to see how much you care about whatever community you're in.
mhm,
Um, and I want to share something with our viewers, of a feature in the Chicago Tribune from last year. When you were living in Chicago, and for those of you who don't know, Anita just recently moved from Chicago to Nashville, and so we don't have Anita's energy in Chicago every day now, but she has had a lasting effect on the city. One of the things was that as an Airbnb host, the Airbnb paired up with NAACP and asked Anita to speak as a representative of a person of color coming in, an Airbnb host. Which, can you talk about your experience with that?
Well, I loved being an Airbnb host. I was an
Mhm.
Airbnb host for a little over 4 years. And living in Bronzeville, being close to downtown, being close to IIT, University of Chicago, the beach, uh, I had a lot of visitors. And I rented a room, and so my Airbnb guest lived in my house with me. And I would take my guest if they wanted to go, and quite a few wanted to go, most of them wanted to go. I would take them to jazz events. I would take them if they had a desire to see different things in the community. If it was something I could do, I would take them around because their safety was very important to me. And I just took guests everywhere I went. I remember one guest came from New York, and I took her to the jazz showcase. I took her to Motor Road to hear some blues, and I took her, and then we met Sandra Bivens at one of those events, and Sandra Bivens invited her to um, come out and see their jazz show. And so this was a Caucasian guest, and so I was a little leery to take her to on 51st Street. I was concerned about her safety, but she was like, "No, we going." I was invited. We're going, and she loved it.
Of course.
I have taken my guests to places, and they have truly, because I wanted to try to make my guests of a different ethnicity understand and appreciate that what you see in the media is not Black culture.
Mm,
What you see, all that negativity, that's not how we live.
mm,
That's not really how we live. That's what the media wants you to think.
mm.
But we do not live like that.
Right.
We live just like everybody else.
Right. And it's hard. I think it's hard for people to see that and understand that when they're given images that don't honestly represent the community.
That's correct. And so I always tried to give them a very positive experience and in Chicago, and I met some amazing people doing Airbnb. I truly, I had a great time doing it in Chicago. I haven't started in Nashville because I really don't have the room now. But, it was a wonderful experience for me.
Well, I love it. Well, you talked about taking your guests to jazz shows, so let's get into this. Let's get into Anita and jazz. So as I mentioned before, for those of you watching, Anita started a series in Bronzeville called Jazzin and Jammin in Bronzeville, and I first heard of it because of a mutual friend of ours. He just happened to post on Facebook pictures of this jazz show that he went to, and it was literally in someone's backyard. It looked like the coolest party ever, and I'm like, this is a jazz series, I want to go to this party. So I think the next time I was available, it had moved. You had started in your backyard.
I started in my backyard, but then because of city ordinances, I had to move to a venue. I had to become legitimate. Moved to the historic Corpus Christi in Bronzeville on 49th and King Drive. Now, Corpus Christi is historic because it is one of the first Black Catholic churches in Chicago.
Right.
It's also one of the churches where the policy kings and the gangsters would post on top of the, I don't know what to call it offhand, but they have a courtyard up top, sort of. And they would post gangsters up there to guard the policy kings.
Oh my gosh.
So this church is historic in many, many, many ways. So I wanted to keep it, to keep my venue in Bronzeville. And Corpus Christi, Father Tony was gracious enough to allow me to come into Corpus Christi and present Jazzin in Bronzeville. And I had many great jazz performances. I had, before we went to Corpus Christi, I had Ari Brown, who you have pictured here. And
and so this is what we're looking at right now is your backyard.
That's in the backyard, yeah.
And I had a few other shots that I wanted to share. So, I mean, it was a party.
Yeah, it was a party. And that's what I wanted it to be. And you know, some people want to listen to jazz, and I have no problem with that. I like to listen to jazz, but I also want it to be an atmosphere where you can talk, where you can be around people, where you can. That's my classmates from grammar school, from St. Edmunds. That post right
Is
there.
it really? I pulled some of your pictures, and this is, to me, this I love, because first of all, it just shows how you bring people together, and just the incredible joy and energy that you have, and it is contagious.
Now, we started kindergarten together. All of those people started kindergarten.
Oh my gosh!
Through 8th grade. We have been friends for 55 years.
That's incredible.
Yes.
That is incredible. I love it. Well, and then I've got a shot here of our friend Isaiah Collier, and this is when you moved into the basement at Corpus Christi. That's where I experienced you all for the first time, and I believe Isaiah came in toward the end of one of the shows, and it was just sort of like a jam session at that point.
He just came in and into the jam session, and he did a jam session in my yard that was rained out, and that was the event that our mutual friend John Lee came to.
Yes.
Isaiah came and he jammed, and he came to this event and jammed, and then he came back and did a show later on in the year. But this is a family of true musicians. The mother, Cynthia, the father, the brother, Jeremiah, they are true musicians. And the talent is outstanding in this family.
Well, and so how did you first become familiar with the Collier family?
Well, I would go to different jazz venues. Joan Colasso's jazz at the Northeastern Southside campus,
Mm-hmm.
Brother Center. I would go to Margaret Murphy Webb's Southside Jazz Coalition, and
Mm-hmm.
I would see in the courtyard in Hyde Park during the summer. I would see
Yes.
Isaiah and his brother Jeremiah, and I became friends with their parents. And I just saw something in this family that was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
The kinship in the family, the love, the showmanship
Mm-hmm.
was just tremendous. And I just had to get to know them, and we became good friends. And I just had to know them. This young man is an outstanding artist,
He is.
mentored by Ari Brown, James. I can't think of his name, and he's been my performer. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'm going blank.
That's
Um,
okay.
he has been mentored by many great artists. He gives his time to mentor other youth.
Mm-hmm.
Joan Colasso's program. Uh, he's just an amazing talent.
He is. He really is. And I just remember him coming in, and it was just like this incredible energy. And then he started playing, and I was like, what is going on? It was just, it was amazing. Um, and so whenever Ruben Dubrovsky, our artistic director, and I, we started talking about this program we're doing in September, and we're talking about um, the music of J.S. Bach and how the generation before him and the generation after in his family, how they dealt with different styles and how they would sort of uh, feed off of the generation before and sort of up them a little bit. We knew that we knew that there was a connection. We knew that we wanted to connect it to Chicago, since that's our musical home, and part of our mission is reframing early music and figuring out why is it still important now, and what is it about Baroque music that's still around right now, and how is it being used. And we know that there are Baroque concepts and building blocks in jazz. I mean, Nina Simone is one person who always comes to mind when I think of like Bach mixing with jazz, because she would start improvising and all of a sudden you get like Bach fugues and things in her improvisation. But have you thought about how Baroque music and jazz music connect, or how we could even think of that?
Well, I've done a little research, I'm not really musically inclined, but apparently the chordal improvisation can be compared between Baroque music and jazz. Now, as I say, I'm not,
Absolutely.
even though I'm not took piano, I'm truly not musically inclined. But the type of chords in different sections of Baroque music and jazz music can be compared um, in today. You know.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
both of them are improvisational.
Mhm.
Both of them are improvisational.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, these are exactly the kind of concepts that we're going to be exploring. And Isaiah, when I first approached him, well, I went to you and I said, we have this idea. Who should I talk to? Isaiah was the first person on the list. He was the first person on the list.
Yeah.
And when I talked to him and I said, well, here's the idea that we have. What do you think? He was so excited. And he even brought up in the conversation how much he loves Bach and how he was classically trained, and how he's really excited to explore these connections. And I believe he's even talking about composing a new piece for the program in September. And so I just want to take this moment to say in front of everybody, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And that will definitely be a trip that I make to Chicago to see that show.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, and I think it's also an opportunity for us to continue these conversations that are starting now. We're talking about ideas of representation in the classical music world. We're talking about ideas of, making these connections and looking back at the roots of classical music. And in Third Coast Baroque's very first um, program. Gosh, the thunderstorm must have taken my brain cells away. When we had our very first performance back in 2016, that was the first thing we were looking at. We were sort of digging into this music and finding that its roots were in Africa and Latin America. And then they started mixing as the slave ships were going around the world at that point. Things were starting to, music and rhythms and dances were starting to move around the world. And so now we're trying to show where did these things come from and give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
You know what? I see Marshall, who's backstage with us. She was asking to explain what Baroque music is, and that's a really good idea. I assume, I deal with it every day. So if you're not familiar with music or you're new to Third Coast Baroque in general, it's the music that comes from what we call the long 17th century. So from around 1600 to about 1750. And that would be composers like J.S. Bach and George Friedrich Handel, who wrote The Messiah, and Antonio Vivaldi, who wrote The Four Seasons. And so music like that sort of flies in that, standard classical music, it's from that era. But that time period in our world was incredibly rich. And there were a lot of cultural exchange and idea exchange during that time, which is why Third Coast Baroque loves exploring that repertoire and making those connections and finding those opportunities for collaboration like this. So we wouldn't be able to do it without you, Anita.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned or that I experienced in coming to the Third Coast Baroque's concert, me and Leona Martin, was the different instruments that were used and I had never seen before.
Right.
That was a great experience for me to see these instruments played, and then the ambiance of it, the costumes, and the way your program lets you know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not familiar with Baroque music or you're new to it, your program explained it perfectly.
Well, thank you.
To me, because I was not familiar with it.
Right.
I was familiar with symphony music, but I was not familiar with Baroque music. So your program laid it out so good to me that I thoroughly understood it. I understood what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I understood the significance of the instruments. You just laid it out perfectly.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I applaud you on how your program was laid out for the concerts that I attended.
Thanks so much, Anita. I mean, that's part of our mission. We're there to provide context. Ruben and I talk a lot about how
That's my dog.
That's right. Mine's down here. He's asleep. So. Ruben and I talk about how context can really help a person get more out of the experience. So, if you didn't have that program there explaining everything, then yeah, it would have been nice, but it was a much richer experience for you because you were able to connect it to different meanings and understandings. And I'm so glad that
I can follow it. As a new experience, I can follow it without just sitting there listening to and wondering, what am I listening to?
Right.
Can understand what I was listening to and understand the history behind it.
Yeah.
It was excellently laid out. It was just a great experience for Sue and I.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, I hope I get to see you both in person again soon.
We'll be there.
Yes, road trip. You know what? I'll road trip up from Florida. I'll pick you guys up in Nashville and we'll all go.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Great to me.
Well, and I think this kind of context and understanding what we're listening to and the dialogue that we have with our audience, whether it's through our printed program or from the stage, like this is exactly what we're shooting for in September with Isaiah and our countertenor Reggie Mobley, and the rest of the band on stage. And so I'm hoping that that if folks join us for that concert, they'll have the same experience or a similar experience to you.
Well, I applaud how you are diversifying this experience. How you are making this experience available because we've talked about different people that are making different venues and genres available to different ethnicities that maybe we're not aware of these different types of music or different genres or different activities or different arts. So I applaud what you're doing to bring Baroque music to the forefront in many people's lives.
Well, I appreciate that, Anita. We're going to keep trying.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Anita, thank you so much for being here with me today and talking. It's always good to see you. Always good to see what specs you're doing today. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to come back to you, but I'm going to let you go for just a second.
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to wrap up today. Friends, this was really great. And I appreciate the everybody watching, both live and watching the replay. I thank Anita for her time and her friendship and openness to the conversations that are going on all over the world right now. As I said, we're not going to solve the problems of the world in one 45-minute episode, but we're at least going to continue the conversations and find out the best action to take to move us all forward. So thank you for joining us today. I hope that we'll see you at a concert as we look toward next season. And like I said, you can follow us by getting on all of our social media channels, as well as subscribing to our email newsletter at thirdcoastbaroque.org. Click subscribe, and you can stay in the know with all of that. And if you feel so inclined, go ahead and join our Capo Club. The first 5 people to sign up as a $10 a month member get a free limited edition Third Coast Baroque tote bag, and $20 a month will get you the tote bag and an incredible limited edition Third Coast Baroque coffee mug. And it's huge. It just holds, you got a whole day's worth of coffee in that thing. It's pretty darn good. But in the meantime, stay tuned. We'll be back next week with Meet the Artist and more Third Coast Thursday. So watch out for our guests there. I'll be making those announcements very soon. Until then, take good care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.